All right, Unit 2 is imperialism and World War One. So why are we learning about imperialism? What is imperialism? Well, we'll explain that in just a second, but the idea of it is it's going to lead to World War One. So what is American imperialism? What is the what and the why of American imperialism? We're taking a look from 1867, so right after the Civil War, up until 1914. So it's the policy aimed at extending the political, economic, and cultural control of the United States government over areas beyond its boundaries. So not within the continental United States. We have a federalist system already in the United States where federal government and state government coexist together, but we're talking about boundaries and territories outside the United States. So what the heck is American imperialism? Well, American imperialism is basically a nice way of saying you have something I want, so I take it, or I buy it from you. Okay, we'll explain what that looks like. Or I have something I want you to have, and I know you don't want it, but I want you to have it, and I don't care if you don't want it, so I'm going to make you take it. We'll explain that one in just a second. Or you have some really nice real estate that I want, and I want to either have influence over it or I want to take complete control over it. So let's take an example of each one of these. Here's some examples. First of all, Alaska. You have something, I want it, so I buy it from you. Alaska is a huge piece of property that was owned by Russia. Russia is traditionally a very poor country. There's a variety of reasons why we buy it, but the United States is going to buy it from Russia for $7.2 million in 1867. That's 2 cents per acre. It's a pretty good deal. Again, most people in the United States was saying, why are we buying this place though? We didn't know that it had oil at the time. The gold rush will come on about 20 years after that, 15 years after that. William Seward decided that it was a great buy and bought it. It was called the Seward Follies. People thought it was a complete joke for doing this. Turns out Alaska has a lot of many natural resources, and it ended up being an enormous buy for the United States. But there's an example of one where you say, you have something, some country outside the United States, I want it, and so I buy it from you. Hawaii. Hawaii is one of those that you say, you have something, I want it, and so I'm just going to take it from you because I'm stronger than you. The Hawaiian Islands are a series of tropical islands in the South Pacific. The sugar that was being grown there is cane sugar, and the U.S. wanted to have control over it. It also, the U.S. Navy, and as we've seen in our book, Admiral Mahon saw that the ports in Hawaii on Honolulu were deep, so you could put large ships in it, i.e. large ships being our Navy, and so they saw it as a great resource to have our Navy base there. So Congress sent U.S. Marines to Hawaii in 1898 and to seize control for 2 reasons. One, the sugar; 2, the Navy ports. Queen Liliuokalani, we're just going to refer to her as Queen Lily, really did not want to give away her authority, but it turns out she is going to end up giving control of the United States. The U.S. will officially annex Hawaii in 1898, and then we will have Hawaii become a U.S. territory in 1900, and then in 1959, Hawaii will be our 50th state. So there's our second one. Second one again, you have something I want, so I take it from you. China, I have something I want to have you, I have something I want you to have. And oh, by the way, China, I don't care if you want it or not, we're going to give it to you and you're going to like it. Okay, so this is that adage that, remember when your parents would give you something like cough medicine and you didn't want it? And you had to have it, or that fluoride that you have to put on your teeth. Remember when you got shots when you were younger? One of those things you really didn't want to have them, but your parents made you have them anywhere. Well, think of this in the United States with China. It's the open door policy. And the open door policy was a statement done by Secretary of State, John Hay, and it was a series of principles. It's a series of principles that the United States gave to the world in 1899. The only problem was a sovereign country in China really didn't want the United States to be in its country in 1899, but the United States wanted to be there. It was designed primarily as saying that America should have the right to trade and have trade privileges with China. As I mentioned, China really doesn't want to do trade with us. It doesn't want to do trade with any countries. They think we're all a bunch of barbarians. We don't care, and so we go there and we make them buy our materials. Remember, in capitalism, I have to continually expand my markets. Now we've been building things and making things, and we're at the point now where we're producing more than we can consume in our country at the turn of the 20th century. So we got to have more markets to sell our chocolate bars, i.e. Hershey's chocolate, to other places. So we're going to go into China and say, we want to sell our chocolate to you. China's going, we don't really eat chocolate. It's not our big deal. We're going, yeah, you're going to start eating chocolate, or Johnson and Johnson products and shampoo or whatever it may be. We're going to go there and sell our products, and you're going to like it, China. Many Chinese are really unhappy about this. China and a group of its warriors that were very much into the martial arts, they're going to be called the boxers, will then say, we don't want you to be here. And a lot of our missionaries were over there, and they killed a great many of our Christian missionary people. And that's when we, along with the other European countries, sent in our military. We sent in about 3,000 troops. France, England, I think Prussia, Russia did. We all sent troops over there, and we squashed that rebellion very, very quickly. We crushed that Boxer rebellion, killed a whole bunch of Chinese, and said, you guys, we've already told you, you're going to like us being here. So there's our third thing. I have something I want you to have, and I don't care if you want it. Panama Canal. You have some really, really choice real estate that I want to influence or have control over. Panama. Panama is an interesting country. It's going to gain its independence from Colombia in 1903. The way it kind of goes about gaining its independence is there's a group of dissidents that I probably can tell you that the United States supported and kind of propped up, and they cried foul, and the United States went to their defense in Colombia and said, these people want us to have their own country. We went to their defense and said, Colombia, you terrible, wretched people, you're holding back on these people. And Panama, Shazam, becomes a country. Panama, though, says, because you were so kind to us, United States, we're going to allow you to build a canal right through here. So this is going to be a canal in Central America that's going to connect the two oceans. It's going to connect the Atlantic to the Pacific. It's going to increase our role in Latin America, which is something we like. That's our backyard. We don't want to have happen to us what happens to China or Japan with us in their backyard. We don't want anybody in our backyard. We're okay with being in someone else's backyard. And the canal is going to make it much easier for the United States to move their Navy from the Pacific to the Atlantic or the other way around. It's a canal built through, so instead of having to go all the way around South America to get up there, you can now cut through Central America. Huge, huge deal. Okay, now the Spanish-American War is going to be a great example of, you have something I want, so I take it from you. Okay, I'll pay you a little bit for it, but I want it nonetheless. So again, here's all the reasons of American imperialism. The Spanish-American War is going to be something where we look at, and we're going to say Spain is in control of a bunch of areas in South America, the Caribbean, and in Asia, and we say we can take it. Spain is no longer a major power. They are sleeping. They are corrupt government. They have lost a great deal of their influence by the turn of the 20th century. Spain has got some brutal treatment of its colony in Cuba and its Cuban citizens. And so we allow our news media. Now, this is not going to make any sense to us today because I'm fairly certain if President Trump told um, the news media that the building was on fire and there was flames coming out of it, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Sun, all of them would say, no, we're not going to report it. I don't care if the flames were burning them, they weren't going to report it. But back then, we got the newspapers to go along with it. And some of these newspapers were doing it for selfish reasons. You know, the more spectacular the news is, the more people buy the newspapers. This is going to come as a news flash. I know CNN and MSNBC and CBS News and all those guys say they hate President Trump, but President Trump brings great ratings to their news stations. So he brings those people to come and watch. So they may hate him as a person, but they love that he's in office because people will watch their newscasts because of him. Well, the LA Times or the New York Times is going to be selling some reports about some bizarre events that are happening in Cuba where the Spanish are mistreating these people to sell newspapers. And that's going to cause the American public to come to the defense of the Cubans, saying that we've got to go to these guys' defense. They're in our backyards. Then the next thing that's going to come out is a Delome letter. And Delome was the Spanish ambassador to the United States. He meets with President William McKinley, and he goes away very, very unimpressed. And he writes a letter back to Spain that somehow gets intercepted, and it's given to the United States press, and it's put in the paper. And as you guys might be able to attest to, I can call my brother a pain in the butt, and I can say he's delusional, but you can't say he's delusional. So the American public may think that William McKinley is kind of a weenie guy, but no, we're not going to have Spain call us a weenie guy. So this gets leaked to the Washington Post and to the New York Times, and now America, along with the reports that Spanish are killing Cubans and murdering babies, they are red hot. So we send some Navy ships down to Cuba to inspect what's going on. And while we have the USS Maine, underline the USS Maine in your notes right now, make sure you know that name. The USS Maine is a battleship. It's in the Cuba's harbor of Havana. It explodes one night. It blows up, and it kills a whole bunch of American sailors. And the American McKinley's administration will blame it on sabotage and blame it on Spain for doing this. There's no proof that they ever did this. And in fact, later on, I'd seen the report that the USS Maine exploded because one of its boilers had a problem, not because of anything the Spanish had done. Well, that's all it took. You had the American journalism, yellow journalism, saying that the Spanish were treating the Cubans poorly. You had the Delome letter saying that the President McKinley was a weenie wimp, and now you have American soldiers dead. Bing, bang, boom, America's going to war. And we went to war with the Spanish. It only lasted for 4 months. It was over with very, very quickly, and they were kicked out. Spain will lose most of its territory and most of its power after this. The United States will acquire Puerto Rico and Guam as territories. That will give us influence in the Pacific and in the Caribbean. They will also purchase the Philippines from Spain. Spain's very, very poor. We give them money, not nearly as much as I'm sure they wanted, but we gave them money and we obtained the Philippines. I'm not sure the Philippines were much in on this. They didn't like the Spanish, so we traded the Spanish for America. And then we'll take control, we'll obtain control over Cuba. And this is going to be the Platt Amendment that we will be talking about or having a lecture on. All right, next, Roosevelt and his big stick policy. Teddy Roosevelt is going to have what we call big stick policy, and it's called a Roosevelt culinary. And the Roosevelt Corollary is an extension of the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine was written by during President Monroe's when President Monroe was James Monroe was the Secretary of State, and basically the Monroe Doctrine stated South America is our backyard. Stay out of our backyard, and we're going to war with you. And if you don't, it's we're throwing down. We're going to go at it. So Roosevelt's going to say the U.S. has the right to use military force to keep order in Latin America. And yeah, if you're sitting there going, well, that's kind of wild. Doesn't the Nicaraguan government have the right to say we either want or don't want American influence? You would think, but the United States said, no, we're going to decide when we come and choose to use military might. And you say, wow, it's kind of wild. And you go, well, there are those out there today, and I think you can make an argument for it. I probably wouldn't agree with it, but I think there's an argument to be made for us that we've done this numerous times in the latter part of the 20th century and now in the 21st century in the Middle East. We have used our military and have military bases in the Middle East. We have military bases in Saudi Arabia, Israel. And we use our influence over there, and we step in. So it's true there. Why? Because it's an incredibly important region that we are not going to just let go. There's always going to be two arguments out there. Is the world a safer place when America is an active participant and an active member in the world community, or is the world a safer place when America is not an active member? You can make an argument both ways. But President Roosevelt, at the turn of the 20th century, will say, no, we're going to have an active role in South America. The next part of that goes along with the Roosevelt Corollary is the dollar diplomacy. And Howard Taft will follow President Roosevelt in office. And this time he's going to say, I'm going to use American banks and money in Latin America instead of our nation's military. And our money and our trade in down there will expand our influence. So again, what is dollar diplomacy? That's William Taft. William Taft is after Teddy Roosevelt. He's going to be 1905 to 1909, I believe. And he's going to use the American dollar to put influence. So he's going to go down to these South American bankers and these South American governments and say, hey, listen, we won't make any loans to you. We won't allow you to get any other loans, and we'll give you money as long as you do what we ask you to do. This is still going on today. I mean, you guys would have no idea how much economic and military aid we give to other countries that you look at and go, why in the world are we giving, and you can fill in the blank all day long, why in the world are we giving economic or military aid to places that are unsafe, that are not friendly to the United States? Afghanistan, what are we doing over there? You can ask that question. What are we doing giving military aid to Egypt or to India, Pakistan? All these countries we give huge amounts of money to, and we do it so we'll have an influence over them and to influence them to come around to us. We're buying their allegiance in some respect, okay? All right, we're going to stop there, but there are a couple things about imperialism that, again, us doing these things, going into China, us taking territories in the Caribbean and over in the South Pacific, and other nations are doing these same things around the world. And this is going to cause tensions in Europe, which is eventually going to explode, and eventually we're going to get drawn into World War I. So there you have American imperialism.